Hello, good morning. Welcome along to Ireland AM on Virgin Media One and Virgin Media Player.
Yes, it is Monday, the 15th of July, with a busy old show coming your way.
We certainly do. There is no place in America for this kind of violence. Those were the words of President Biden after former President Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt in Pennsylvania on Saturday. And of course, we will be discussing this event and what it means for America at 7:15.
It was an unforgettable weekend of sport, especially if you're from Galway, Armagh, or my goodness, Spain last night. We are going to be covering all the weekend's most memorable moments. That's going to be coming up at 7:45.
Absolutely. Alcaraz was definitely in the lion's den when he was won.
We'd love to hear from you on that. Now, she says she retains the full confidence of her party, but recognises that they have failed to have the backs of their supporters on key issues. Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou McDonald, she is going to join us in studio here at 8:15.
But before all of that, we're told that Derek has just one rule. Derek, what is your rule?
One rule, guys, don't feed the deer. And that is the message from the OPW here this morning, the Office of Public Works. Of course, a massive issue at the moment here in the Phoenix Park with members of the public coming up to feed the wild deer here. So we're going to be catching up with the park rangers a little bit later on this morning. Now, it's a sunny start for Galway and Armagh this morning. Not so sunny for Kerry and Donegal, unfortunately. And it looks like plenty of rain feeding up across the country as the day goes on. But what a weekend of sport and what a weekend of football as well. Come on, Galway and Armagh.
You're very welcome back. It's time now to take a look at this morning's papers, where the front pages are dominated by one story. We'll start with the Irish Times. Their headline is "America looks into the abyss after attempted assassination of Trump." An assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump left one victim who attended the rally dead and several others injured.
The Examiner says Trump shooting changes everything. US President Joe Biden has said America must, quote, unite as one nation, just a day after his political rival Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt.
Evil won't win, vows Trump on shooting. Donald Trump vowed he would not allow evil to win after surviving an assassination attempt. The former US president has been tipped for a landslide election win after a gunman opened fire at a rally in Pennsylvania. That's the front of the Daily Mail.
The Herald goes with 300 hit by ATM scam gang. More than 300 bank users were victims of a cash machine scam that saw €90,000 trapped inside cash points for criminals to later collect. 3 men have been arrested over the, quote, cash trapping in Dublin and Meath last week.
The Mirror returns to the story of Donald Trump's attempted assassination, leading with face of Trump shooter. Thomas Matthew Crooks opened fire in Pennsylvania with his father's rifle before being shot dead by law enforcement.
The Sun says a whisker from JFK, Donald Trump was just millimetres from death when a would-be assassin's bullet grazed his ear during a campaign rally.
Yeah, the Star leads with inch from death. Donald Trump yesterday credited God for saving him from the unthinkable. An assassin opened fire during a rally on Saturday afternoon.
And finally, the Irish Independent sums up this story with the headline, "Fear and Loathing in America." So coming up after the break, we will be looking at how the event unfolded and what it could mean for a country which is deeply divided already.
Yes, we're going to be discussing all that after this short break. You're very welcome back. Now, on Saturday, at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania, former President Donald Trump was the victim of an attempted assassination.
The shocking incident has led to appeals for calm and unity in a deeply divided United States of America. Here is the moment the attack took place.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
One person did lose their lives during that attack. With us to discuss those scenes and the impact it's having across the political spectrum in America is Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies at UCD, and Sean Defoe, political correspondent with Bauer Media. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
It's lovely to have you here. Scott, as an American, what did you make of what we saw on Saturday night?
Yeah, you know, I'll speak as a person, not as an analyst. It was just this shock that had set in. I was actually doing British media at the time. So we saw the images come in live. But when the shot came in, there was a second wave of it, which is, this might not be the end of it. And I need to explain this why, and why I'm so concerned today. I think a lot of your viewers will have seen not only those scenes, but they will have seen the iconic photograph of Trump with his fist raised to the sky, surrounded by the Secret Service, the American flag in the background. Now, what that says about Trump is that whatever you think about Trump in terms of his policies, in terms of his rhetoric, the man's a reality TV star. And he wanted to get the shot at that point. But it's what followed just before, it's what was just before that was so disturbing. Trump tries to push the Secret Service away and is shouting, "Wait, wait, wait." And he does that not just to get his shoes. He does that so he could put that fist in the air, and then he shouts out at the crowd, "Fight, fight, fight," which is when you hear the crowd go, "USA, USA." And the reason why that disturbed me is those were the same words, almost the exact same words he said on January 6, 2021, when he was standing outside the White House and telling those supporters to fight, fight, fight to overturn the congressional confirmation of Joe Biden. And your viewers will know what happened next at the U.S. Capitol. So I'm worried that despite his overnight statement, which was crafted to talk about unity, that Donald Trump is a politician who has made his way with the politics of violence. You know, he has called for violence against the left. He's called for violence against hecklers at his rallies. He's called for violence against other protesters, say Black Lives Matter. He's called for violence against migrants, against asylum seekers, and he's called for violence against people in the media. Now, does that continue? And some Trumpists did continue that in the last 48 hours. Or do they dial it down, as President Biden said overnight?
Yeah, I think because you can see later on in some of the reports, whenever they put former President Trump into the car and he takes away, that the public there turn towards the media and to the cameras, and the abuse and screaming at the media. There's a huge amount of anger in America at the minute, Sean. And will this divide people more, what happened at the minute? Or will this lead to actually, because they're talking about it in the papers, this is going to be a landslide now for Donald Trump due to what happened there?
Yeah, well, look, it's an inflection point for America. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And when we see Donald Trump, we will get an idea in that first speech of which way he is going to go on this, because he has a chance to change the debate. I think you're being optimistic if you think he's going to do it. You know, as Scott said, this is a man who has built his entire campaign for the last 10 years on violence, on division, on hatred, on scrapping apart the democracy of America, essentially. And to think that's going to change overnight, you know, is a little bit ludicrous. Like, the question really is he going to have a come to Jesus moment, or is he going to have an I am Jesus moment? And you see in the language that they have been using since that it is a miracle that he survived, thanking God that this is, you know, some sort of sainted figure and it was some sort of divine intervention that saved him, trying to appeal to that religious fundamentalism that's in the United States. And I think more likely that's the way it goes. In fairness, in the last 24 hours, the statement that we saw, which almost certainly wasn't crafted by him, was very conciliatory, was very calming, was very soothing. So they pulled everyone back from the brink, and you could feel some of the Republicans wanting to go hell for leather, like Scott said, attacking the Democrats and saying, well, you've been upping the rhetoric, you've been calling him dangerous, you've been saying this is a man threatening democracy, no wonder someone took a shot at him. But really, there's one person who dialed this up, and at the root of his own assassination attempt was Donald Trump himself.
So there is his statement that was on his own social network site, Truth Social, yesterday. Can we, because there's been so many videos now of the shooter, of Thomas Matthew Crooks, of him belly crawling across there's cameras absolutely everywhere. What do we know about him, Sean?
So we know remarkably little as to the motive for why he did this, the specific motive. So what we know is he was a 20-year-old, he was from a relatively affluent suburb of Pittsburgh, that he was a registered Republican voter, but that he had made small donations to Democratic causes in the past. We don't have a huge handle on social media. It's not like he put up some sort of letter or some sort of statement that he was going to do this. The rifle was his father's, was legally owned, and that's where he sourced it, and his family are cooperating with the statement. So a perfectly ordinary person from the outside of it, but obviously has done a completely unordinary thing. So we'll hopefully get in the next few days. The FBI have his phone and are analysing to see if there's any more into a specific motive. You can read all sorts of big picture motives into why this might have happened, but why this one person chose this one moment, we don't know yet.
And a failure by the security detail of President Trump as well.
Yeah, but it's the Secret Service, so it's not just Trump. It's like this is the institution that's supposed to protect Joe Biden, protect other politicians as well. And what is still inexplicable is this shooter doesn't look like he was inside the perimeter where you had the magnetrons, right?
Yeah.
But he was just outside the perimeter on the roof of a building, which was less than 500 feet from Donald Trump. Why was that building not secured? And what we're also getting is why, when witnesses saw him for about 10 minutes before the shooting, belly crawling, was there not action taken against this possible threat?
Because that's it. We're having an awful lot of reports from the BBC, looking at them this morning, saying we told the police, or people saying that they said that they told the police that this was happening. So that is a huge question mark over the Secret Service.
Yeah, and there's a real risk here that while there needs to be a full investigation here, and you've got the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms that are out there, that this gets politicized very quickly by certain members of Congress who happen to be Republican, which is to take a shot at what they call the deep state. To take a shot at all the agencies and say none of the agencies are reliable, Secret Service is amongst them, which feeds into a Trumpian narrative.
So this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is currently going out there saying the Department of Justice isn't fit for a service and therefore they should be disbanded.
Which is part of the whole Trumpist tactics, which is the whole judiciary, the whole system of protecting America is corrupt.
Right.
And Donald Trump's the only one who can save us.
How has President Biden reacted to this? Because there was a lot of talk at the weekend that President Biden is coming under increasing pressure to step down, whether they feel he is fit for office and fit to run again. How has he come out of the reaction to this? And what do you think will happen with him over the next couple of days?
You know, I would have, if I'd spoken to you last Thursday, last Friday, I would say this would be the week the Democrats would have a new candidate.
Yeah.
That's gone. Biden stays at this point.
He can't step aside now.
If you were going to replace Biden, two things would have to happen. First is he would have to go of his own accord. You can't overthrow him. And we know that Biden doesn't want to go. He still thinks he can beat Donald Trump. He's a proud man. Secondly, if you were going to persuade him to step aside, you need to do it before the Democratic Convention, which is August 19th, because you need to prepare the replacement candidate to take on Trump. We now have a period of probably 1, 2, 3 weeks where Biden will present himself as the unifying figure for America, as he did overnight. How can you replace him in those circumstances?
And it's kind of his position of power now. It's his route back to maybe not contention in the election, that might be gone at this stage, but certainly to holding on to that nomination because he has the role. There's a huge amount to be said for incumbency, for looking presidential. And if Donald Trump, to put it into political terms, messes this up and he comes out and he's fire and brimstone and he puts off that middle ground while Biden looks very prudential and says, no, we need to calm this down. We need to get everyone around the table. We need to get away from all this rhetoric. That is probably his only path back to winning the election if Trump himself slips up.
Obviously, there was an awful lot last week. His inner circle, his children, Jill Biden, his sister, Jill Biden was on the front of Vogue magazine staring off into the distance, going, we will decide our future, which comes off as kind of monarchist, actually, to be honest. So that's happening there, right? But last week at NATO, the gaffes, the President Putin for President Zelensky calling Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. These gaffes, they're highlighted and they're sent around the world. That was after an hour of him going into policy and actually really chatting, but it doesn't matter, Sean.
No, see, this is what gets highlighted now in the 24/7 news cycle that we live in, because actually most of that press conference wasn't that bad. He held up, he was talking about the points, like you said, but the things you see in the morning is straight away is Vice President Trump is when he's talking about, when he says about Vladimir Putin being the Ukrainian president. You know, that's what comes across. But at the same time, right, if you are the Democrats, who else is going to beat Trump? Because if you look now, specifically now after this weekend, I don't think bringing a new candidate does it. You could have made the argument before the weekend, maybe you disagree, that if you brought in somebody new, there's this almost Simon Harris-esque moment to it where you get new energy behind them and you say, right, we've a new direction, we've new policies, it's all exciting. I think that all goes by the wayside. This moment has changed everything. And so your hope is that Biden can somehow summon it out of wherever it is still in there. And you could see it in there, in him in moments, the politician that he was.
Yeah.
But can he keep it together for a debate, for the rest of the campaign, for a rally speech, for a press conference,
For
where
4
every
years.
tiny slip, every tiny slip is highlighted.
He's under a magnifying glass. Where is it going in the next couple of months?
Well, I've got a wider concern, which is beyond Biden and Trump. And it's a wider concern about my country, because even before this happened over the weekend, and while we were talking about Biden's future, the first thing I was noticing is the issues aren't getting discussed. And this is perhaps the most important American election since 1865. Women's rights, including abortion rights, which are under threat. Climate change, health care, the economy, immigration, foreign policy crises from Ukraine to the Middle East, the threat to democracy itself. And the American media isn't covering it. They're being led by the spectacle. And my second point of concern, specifically, they're being led by a spectacle in which it was simply old Joe, focusing on his mental state of mind, without focusing on the mental state of mind of a other candidate who, just a reminder, happens to be a convicted felon, a sex abuser, a fraudster, a coup plotter, and possibly a serial liar.
Right, well, we will see
But
where
he's going
that's
to win
going to
in a
go for them.
landslide.
He's going to win in the landslide as well, and there's so
Apparently.
much going on. Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies in UCD. Listen, thank you so much for coming in and discussing that with us this morning. Very, very interesting. And Sean, you're going to hang around to discuss the other stories making the papers. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Back in just a minute in Ireland Day.
Good morning. It's great to have you back with us here on Ireland Day.
Still with us to discuss all of today's top political stories is political correspondent with Bauer Media, Sean Defoe. Hello, Sean. Lovely to still have you here. Obviously, we've talked about Trump and Biden. The rest of the top pages are all sport. So there are other things in the news. And this is about the number of hospital beds in Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
Over 10 years. What's going on here?
Yeah, there's actually been an increase, and I suppose people will kind of say, right, really,
Sorry?
you know, after all the hospital bed and the trolley crisis issues that we have had, but there has been an increase of about 28% over the past decade in the number of hospital beds. So it's about 3% a year. It's not huge, but it is significant. That said, we still have the 5th lowest number of hospital beds among the EU 27. There is a 43% gap between us and the average in the EU. Weirdly, the number of beds in the EU, other countries have been declining over the last 10 years. There's been a 7%
So
drop.
too many beds.
Kind of too many beds. Well, they've been changing the way they do medical care, same way we've been doing it here. A lot of it has gone to the private sector or to special, dedicated sort of hospitals rather than going into general hospital for surgery. You go to an elective hospital, and that's something some of the parties are saying they'd like to see in Ireland. You have more hospitals dedicated to specialised surgeries, so that if you need your hip done or whatever, you're going to somewhere that deals specifically in that rather than it taking up a more general hospital.
Am I right in saying there's around 28% of the budget goes towards health? A huge amount of money. And we're still 43% below the EU average.
It's remarkable.
It's insane.
It's more than €1 in every €4 goes to health, and I think €1 in every €4 goes to social welfare. So we have, half of the budget that we spend every year and that's being done at the moment is going to go towards those two things. Last week in the summer economic statement, the government announced that there'd be a €1.5 billion additional budget for health. This year, 1.1 million of that has already been spent, so you're talking about 400 million and an extra 1.2 billion for next year.
Yeah.
They said it is going to come with strings in that they want to see certain targets, they want to see certain things on recruitment, but you kind of get to a point where you believe that when you see it, because when you look at our total health spend, it has more than doubled since 2014. I think it was 11.1 billion in 2014. It's about 24 billion now. Yet I don't think anyone using the service would say that the capacity has doubled. The service you're getting has doubled.
I know, we spend the most per capita in Europe as well on our health service.
And even
so that's what it is.
the 9th lowest number of long-term care and nursing homes as well. So it's that's where you can't even get out of hospitals to go to
Can't
care
get out of
after, which is
hospitals or
another huge issue.
And there's a lot of focus of getting into the community and more care in the community, but sometimes there are people who need a nursing home and just can't stay in their own home.
You can get in contact with us 0896 111 111 in relation to our health system and what you make about those figures. Now, what's going on with Rory, the legend? legend that is Rory Gallagher.
Yeah, what's been called one of the most legendary guitars in history, his Fender Stratocaster. Yeah, because it's so used and battered. It's funny, you know, you see when you go and you see groups now and they're changing guitars every song. It's like, not Rory. He battered this yoke until it was done. It was bought in Cork on credit for £100, and now the shop that he bought it from in Cork, which is now owned by the daughter of the person who ran it at the time, wants to see it return to Cork. This is going up for sale for, I think it's €1.17 million is the guide price. And look at it there, like that's a guitar that's
€1.17 million for Rory Gallagher's guitar.
Rory Gallagher's story.
Wow.
That one, I'd say.
Yeah. To be fair, he wrote some.
Well, I mean, like the history, you know, if guitars could talk.
But the music store owner has set up a GoFundMe page to try and buy it back.
They have got
They're a bit
19 grand at the minute, so there's a little bit that needs to go. But people could donate to that online if they want to. But interestingly, the government has now sort of said, oh, this is a bit of a cultural icon artefact. This might be a bit interesting. I'd love to be in that budget discussion. Here, lads, we need a lot for health, but you know what? I want to buy a deadly guitar.
So this is because his brother is selling it, and it's thought that it's going to go outside of the country. It's going to be bought by an outside buyer.
Well, it's in London at the minute, you know, and so they want to keep it in Ireland. This is an artefact of Irish musical history.
Micheál Martin hosts a civic reception for him as well. Proud Cork man. Keep the guitar in Cork.
Keep it in
so
the
health system doesn't work, but let's buy a guitar. Is that what you're saying? Music, the arts are important.
Arts are important. History.
Don't be knocking the arts, but for Micheál Martin, it's not even keep it in the country, it's keep it in the county.
Keep it in
Ireland, it has to go to Cork by.
Lovely.
Love it. Final story. This is a nice story. Well, we talk about public transport all the time, so why not take public transport to your wedding?
Yeah, and staying in Cork as we are. Bride Lucy Kelly and groom Tig Dennehy, they decided to get the train to Cork to Cove rather, from Cork for their wedding. Everyone got on the train rather than driving everybody down the way, enjoyed the party. I don't know, did they have the snack cart? That was one thing I'd love to know. Did they get the cups of tea and the little pink snack?
Was it on time?
Yeah.
She was late for the wedding. She was late for the wedding because of delay at the train station.
But 100 of their guests got the train from where they had the wedding out to Cove where they were doing the reception, and they did a conga through the train.
Did a conga through the train. I'd say there was some crack on that. The only thing I could imagine, right, it sounds brilliant, great way to do it, fair play to them, it looks like they had a great day, but could you imagine you were going on like your morning commute and you sat in and you're tired and you've got your keep cup in and you just want everyone to leave you alone and a conga line wedding comes through.
Can you beat the train as your mode of transport to your wedding? Let us know. We've got a Cadillac sedan, Rolls-Royce, some of the top ones according to weddingsonline.ie. What did you go to your wedding in? Send us a picture. 0896 111 111. We did. And now Massey Ferguson.
Massey Ferguson.
Sister looked very well, and Toby,
so cool.
Congratulations to the pair of them as well. Sean Defoe from Newsong, as ever, great to have you with us. Thank you for that, Sean. Now, coming up after the break, it's all sports.
We'll be back with you very shortly on Ireland AM. It's been I'd say an incredible weekend of sport, especially if you're from Armagh, Galway or Spain. Ola.
Or Ireland, the rugby, don't forget about that. Joining us to discuss it all is Off the Balls Aisling O'Reilly, former Dublin footballer Paddy Andrews. And joining us live from Berlin is Irish Independent's football correspondent Daniel McDonald. Good morning, Daniel. We'll come to you very shortly to get the reaction in Berlin. But let's talk all things Croke Park at the minute. Paddy, Galway. It was an epic semi-final between Galway and Donegal yesterday. Galway scraped it, they're into the final.
Galway back in the final for the first time since 2022, and they just about deserved it. It was a brilliant game, and I thought both semi-finals this weekend. It's been a long football championship. Just over 3 months. First week of April, the championship started, but we got two classic semi-finals. Armagh upset the odds on Saturday night, winning in extra time to beat Kerry, but Galway yesterday, it was a brilliant game. Massive crowd in Croke Park as well. It was nip and tuck the whole way, level so many times, level at half-time.
10 times they drew level through the match.
And it was just probably Galway's little bit more experience than Donegal. Donegal have been on a phenomenal run with Jim McGuinness all year. Massive credit to them, the Ulster champions. But they only get one score in the last 25 minutes. And it was they seem to just run out of ideas and maybe a bit of energy, and Galway, that kind of defensive system they have. It wasn't their best performance by any means. They probably didn't reach the heights they reached in the quarter-final victory over Dublin, but they were the better team yesterday, and it sets up a final in 2 weeks' time. A very novel final. Galway and Armagh.
Yeah, who would have thought it?
Nobody would have called that a couple of months ago.
No, definitely not. And I think tactically brilliant semi-finals. I think tactically how Galway set up as well, like they left 3 up top, which I thought was quite brave on their part, absolutely, because it sort of stopped the runners for Donegal and playing the game that they normally play. And then for Armagh as well, like this is incredible for them. Like the atmosphere in there on Saturday was off the charts. Like the supporters,
Kerry, nobody saw that coming.
No one saw it coming, and the supporters were just incredible. You talk about the 16th man on the pitch, like with the supporters. That was the best example that I've seen of it. Like they just got behind them, and it was that difference, that momentum. And I think Rian O'Neill, 3 points in the end. He really just stood up when they needed him. He had this massive catch just at the very end, the ball off the line, and it was their day. Finally was their day. They finally got over the line.
And they're both high-scoring games, which is great to see in a football, which is what people want. They want it end-to-end. But I suppose a talking point has been brought up again, and you feel so bad for them because there's such focus on the Clifford brothers. When it comes, if they're having a dip in form, it means it's just not good for Kerry. And that's a lot to have on your shoulders, Aisling.
It's a lot of pressure, and we need to remember, like, David Clifford is so young, and he will be back again. It wasn't his year this year. You can't have every year to be your year, Paddy. Like, you can't. And look, he still was brilliant out there, just not maybe to his levels. And I think Paddy as well, he was trying to make things happen, maybe forcing it a little bit coming down the stretch, but he got some incredible points.
You have to look at the wider Kerry performance. It's not just about the 2 guys. I know they're outstanding players, but Kerry probably weren't good enough to win that game as a whole. So they have a tough winter ahead. Armagh were the better team, and I think you said it, Maren, both games, all 4 teams went for it.
Oh, brilliant.
They backed themselves, and it shows. We've watched a lot of really poor Gaelic football matches over the summer, but to those 4 teams at the weekend, it shows how good it can be when they actually back themselves.
And I love it to have teams like Galway, like Armagh into a final. Like it keeps the whole championship alive as well. Different teams and opportunities to win as well. Listen, let's talk about the Euros last night. Let's actually go across to Germany.
I woke up going,
now.
Has it come home? Because I got to bed, I was like, is it home?
Listen, it was a fairly epic game, to be fair to. Listen, Daniel, let's go to you. You were in the stadium last night. Spain won 2-1. I think it was a goal in the final few minutes for Spain to seal it. Deserved winners, though. What would you think?
It is. Like, it's actually rare that you have maybe a very straightforward conclusion to a tournament. Like, in simple terms, the best team won the competition. They won all 7 games they played. They had the hardest route. I mean, they beat Germany in the quarterfinals, France in the semi-finals, England in the final. And like, quite similar to the quarterfinal in some ways, Spain, where they were in control, then there's an equaliser, and you're thinking, again, has England been powered by some invisible force here? They've got the momentum that the best team has won this competition, and that's probably better, I think, for the memory of the competition. It's been hot and cold at times, but it's a great team that's won it, a team that'll probably, with their age profile, challenge for future tournaments as well.
Absolutely, and I think it was kind of, they've done very well. They've gotten to the final of the Euros, you know. Gareth Southgate, he did a great job. He's been involved in so much. Listen, I'm sure that there was plenty of celebrating last night in Berlin, hopefully in the right way. No hassle that we know of, Daniel?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there was a little bit of a small little bits afterwards, but nothing that's even worthy of comment, really. I think the English fans during the competition, I've been at 5 other games, I think, and they have a reputation. There's a few songs you wouldn't be mad about, but in general, I think, look, the manner of their defeat, there was no controversy or anger or outrage. It was the best team won, and I think most people accepted it.
You see that in the back of the papers, even talking about how the players have done the country proud, which, to be fair, whenever they do lose, it could go the other way. Daniel McDonald, thank you so much for joining us from the Indo and in Berlin this morning. More sport.
Up to this, you haven't seen this yet, have you?
No, what's
Prince
this?
William and his son, the eldest one,
really?
and they're both like this. It's a meme. It's gone everywhere.
Well, let's talk about Princess Kate. And she was at the Wimbledon final.
Great
Alcaraz,
to see her, wasn't it?
standing ovation for her as well. But Alcaraz, what a convincing win over Novak.
Yeah, convincing. I think that is the word. Like, 21 years of age, he is just incredible. You just never know what he's going to do, and I think that was just a standout performance for him. The way he did it, he just kept Novak constantly guessing with his drop shots. he was just brilliant from throughout. And I think this is a really big moment from that. He's going to be one of the greats. Like I feel like we're watching one of the greats. And
they're
at
talking
such a
about
young
him
age.
now at 21, going on to win the 20 to beat Djokovic's record.
He's a superstar.
And he's 21.
Yeah. Well, what he's done already so far. I mean, you know, look at the longevity of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic at 37.
Yeah.
Still incredible for Djokovic to still be going. He's amassed an incredible tally of Grand Slams, but Alcaraz, he's already off to a fast start. And you look at the wider landscape of the game, that golden era of the four guys, Djokovic, Murray, Federer, Nadal, that is kind of over now. So the path is clear for Alcaraz. There doesn't seem to be anyone else with the consistency or reaching the levels he has hit. So we're going to see a lot of this guy over the next couple of decades.
And just very quickly to the women's, because Paulini, I know she lost the women's final, but she is such an exciting and
such a joy.
I'm a huge fan. She's so good. She's a
incredible, a joy.
She said the same with Ons Jabeur last year. You love the ones who come second.
I love Ons. I do love Ons as well.
I think that both
she was
of them
so good.
So good. And both of them in their first Wimbledon final, and you could see it afterwards. They were in awe.
It was a great
There was a
final.
little bit of nerves to begin with, and then they both just got into
so
it.
good.
And it came down to that third set in the end to decide it. But I do think for Jasmine, like, she has just been incredible. Like, she spoke after it, and everyone just lights up. She lit up the whole tournament.
She did.
But for Krejcikova as well, like, it's amazing for her. She won the French Open in 2021. She's really kicking into gear now. She was injured at the start of the season, so to go on and win Wimbledon, as she said afterwards, I can't believe it. It's a dream come true.
Drinking champagne with Pink after
She
as
was.
well, I gather as well.
Down there with Pink,
And I
yeah.
have to give an honourable mention as well to Ireland beating South Africa at the weekend. What a bloody
Kieran
result.
Frawley.
Kieran Frawley, take a bow, man. Well done for that epic weekend of sport. Aisling O'Reilly, as ever, great to have you with
Thanks,
us.
guys.
And Paddy Andrews, brilliant.
Cheers,
Love
thanks
it.
so much. Now, after the break, Sinn Féin leader Mary Lee McDonald will be joining us in studio.
Yes, we're going to be talking to her after the break. You're very welcome back. It's time now to take a look at this morning's papers, where the front pages are dominated by one story. We'll start with the Irish Times. Their headline is "America looks into the abyss after attempted assassination of Trump." An assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump left one victim who attended the rally dead and several others injured.
The Examiner leads with "Trump shooting changes everything." US President Joe Biden has said America must unite as one nation just a day after his political rival Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt.
Evil won't win, vows Trump on shooting. Donald Trump vowed that he would not allow evil to win after surviving an assassination attempt. The former US president has been tipped for a landslide election win after a gunman opened fire at a rally in Pennsylvania. That's the top story on the Daily Mail.
The Herald goes with a different story. It says 300 hit by ATM scam gang. More than 300 bank users were victims of a cash machine scam that saw €90,000 trapped inside cash points for criminals to later collect. 3 men have been arrested over the so-called cash trapping in Dublin and Meath last week.
The Mayor returns to the story of Donald Trump's attempted assassination, leading with face of Trump shooter. Thomas Matthew Crooks opened fire in Pennsylvania with his father's rifle before being shot dead by law enforcement.
The Sun leads with a whisker from JFK. Donald Trump was just millimetres from death when a would-be assassin's bullet grazed his ear during a campaign rally.
Yeah, same. The Star leads with inch from death. Donald Trump yesterday credited God for saving him from the unthinkable. An assassin opened fire during a rally on Saturday afternoon.
And finally, the Irish Independent sums up this story with the headline, "Fear and Loathing in America."
Yes, that story dominating all the papers this morning. Of course, the back pages are all dominated by sport with the Euros last night and, of course, the All-Ireland semi-finals. Yeah. And we have a message in from Lauren, who's from Galway, of course, who's just said, huge win for Galway. Like, to be fair, the atmosphere in Croke Park was unbelievable. Yeah. Like, the crowds over the weekend were amazing. Great to see a new pairing in the final. Hopefully, Sam is coming back west.
And it was a great advertisement for football this weekend because they just went for it. It was so good. Same with the hurling. you know, that there's going to be someone else new winning it. So absolutely,
I think it just
brilliant.
opens it up, which is really nice.
Now you didn't get to see, like you were watching a bit of sport, but you were very busy.
No, I was.
You're at a wedding.
It was a big wedding at the weekend. Yes, congratulations to my sister Hannah and new husband Toby. Welcome to the family. And they might even be watching this morning because I think they're going to have a few sore heads this morning too, like me.
We're keeping it together, guys. We're keeping it together. But Hannah, we were talking about a couple in Cork who'd gotten the train to go to their wedding. They got married in Cork and they got the train to Cove to the reception.
Isn't that nice, isn't it? Lucy Kelly and Tig Donnelly opted for the train. That's a good
and
way
their
to get to the
100
wedding.
guests, and they went to Conga through the train, which I think is just that.
We don't
have
have trains in Monaghan, unfortunately.
No, you don't. But what do you have in Monaghan?
Lots of tractors.
Is that how you? Is that
a
how
big Massey Ferguson? Yes. Look, there they are, the happy couple on the Massey. Take me away, Toby.
And Toby's English, is he?
Toby's English hadn't been. He had to go for a lesson on Friday on learning how to drive the tractor. But he did very well, and congratulations.
Any other pictures for us? We'd love to see them. 0896 111
Now, coming up after the break, we're going to be joined by the Sinn Féin leader, Mary Lou McDonald.
That's just right.
Good morning, it's great to have you back with us. Now, it has been an interesting few months for Sinn Féin. Poor performances at local and European level have been contrasted with gains in Northern Ireland during the UK election.
Joining us to discuss these recent results and the party's plans for the future is Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou McDonald. Good morning, Mary Lou. Lovely to have you.
Good morning. Great to be here.
The voice is still there because you were certainly shouting last night, letting us know, I think on Twitter, you were speaking an awful lot of Spanish during the football, weren't you?
Sí, ole, ole, yeah. When I wasn't shouting,
your thumbs were doing the shouting for you last night.
Yeah, no, I was absolutely thrilled for them. It was a great day for Spain between Carlos lifting the trophy at Wimbledon and then that incredible win.
What is it with Spain?
So I used to live in Spain.
Right.
Tommy, you see, back in the day I lived in Andalusia in the south, in a place called Almeria, in a little pueblo called Adra. So I lived there and I worked, and I have lots of Spanish mates.
So it wasn't just ABE, anyone but England.
Well, no. And in fairness, England were there. I mean, they qualified, they played well, they were just beaten by
They were there. Listen, we have to talk in light of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. It's across all the front pages of the papers this morning. What is your response? And does this make you consider about the safety of politicians locally in Ireland as well?
Well, look, I mean, I think everybody was shocked by this, and clearly it's to be absolutely condemned. I mean, anybody, irrespective of their political views, irrespective of where they are in the political spectrum, has to be able to go about their business safely. So America is shocked. The world is shocked by this. I heard the American president say that things need to be cooled down. I mean, things are very fractious now stateside. It's very, very divisive, their politics. So this is like a really, really frightening escalation of it. And you have to imagine it's going to have some influence or effect in terms of the campaign itself. For one thing, security now will be ratcheted up. I don't know what the political fallout will be. But certainly nobody wants to see violence like that entering the political sphere.
But it was said
somebody did remark to me, though, and I think this is interesting, that, you know, this horrific, horrendous attack is made on Donald Trump, and it's the headline news all across the globe.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, dozens more Palestinians have been killed, and it gets mentioned, but it doesn't get anything like the same kind of oxygen of publicity.
It doesn't. And of course, that's an unfairity in the world. We absolutely understand that. But he was a former president, and this is at a campaign rally. And we are talking about politicians here a few months ago just saying that someone could be killed in relation to what's happening in Ireland, and that we have got more and more protests, people coming with balaclavas outside people's houses, outside serving politicians' houses. And we know that it's hard for you to sit here and go, yeah, we need to be protected more. You can't say that. People have a right to protest. But is it something that you worry about, personal safety in Ireland?
You don't even have to go as far as the United States. I mean, Joe Cox across the water from us, you know, so this can happen. This has happened. It should never, ever happen. And yes, people have to be safe. Public figures have to be safe going
Do you
about
worry
their business.
going about your day-to-day?
I don't actively worry about it, Maureen. I mean, you have to get out there and get on with it. But is it a matter of concern for people in public life? Yes. Fortunately, I haven't had any really, really nasty experiences. A lot of stuff online is horrific. I have had protests outside of my house, but I do respect people's right to protest. But this is a whole other level, and what happened to Donald Trump, it brings it to the next level again.
It is absolutely frightening. Listen, let's talk about your own party, Sinn Féin. It's been a disappointing couple of months in terms of the local elections. You've spoken about it over the weekend as how Sinn Féin haven't reflected voters' concerns on a number of issues. How are you going to rectify this in what could be an extremely busy couple of months ahead?
Yeah, and in your intro, you kind of contrasted how well we did in the northern elections. I mean, outstanding results. We returned our 7 seats, bigger majorities, ran it very close in East Derry. And then we're an all-Ireland party, so we're constantly fighting elections. So we did very well in that election, but we underperformed. We were disappointed with the local and European elections. So we've started fixing it. Tommy, to answer your question, we've had a very, very comprehensive review. I received that report, its recommendations at the weekend, and we're going to crack on and implement them. And at the core of it, politically, our base, the electorate, was saying to us that we were not reflecting, that we weren't listening, and that we weren't reflecting fully and faithfully the experiences of people and the concerns of people in a range of areas. One of the things that came back very strongly to us were those 2 referendums on care and family. And we got that wrong. I mean, we called it wrong. We accepted something that was second best. We shouldn't have done that.
You also said you would rerun it if you got into power.
Well, I mean, I value the work of carers hugely, and I think they are worthy of mention and protection in our law. So there'd be no question of rerunning the referendum. The people have spoken, and that's the end of it. No, it's done. That is done. What we have to do, though, is do better for carers and for people with disabilities. So we will, as when you mentioned, the next election, in the general election, those 2 groups of people will be absolutely critical for us.
Mary Lou, for the past, in all fairness, for the last few years, you were on a crest of a wave. It was just the opinion polls. And I suppose that might be hubristic to be looking and paying attention to opinion polls, but you have to look at them. And it was the most popular party, biggest party. Everyone has that. And then this big drop in support. And supporters, like hearing people shout traitor when it comes to Sinn Féin, that you're traitors. There's an awful lot of issue about where you stand on immigration. Do you have the full support of your party? Because it is probably the first time that your leadership has come under question.
I do. I absolutely do. And I will lead us into the next general election. And I recognise, along with my colleagues, we have a lot of work to do. I mean, you mentioned the issue of immigration. I accept absolutely that we need to bring more clarity. To that end, we're going to publish a policy paper next week, this day next week. But one of the issues on immigration itself that came back very strongly to us was that in many communities where resources are very stretched, where people are anxious that resources can't be stretched any further, and they didn't hear us naming that and challenging the government strongly enough on that. And we have been told directly by our base that they want to have those issues aired respectfully.
So you're talking about hotels that have been taken over in various places to house international protection?
I'm talking about the whole range of things where people, for instance, can't get access to a general practitioner, to a GP, and then they ask themselves, well, if more people are coming into the community, how are any of us going to have access to the care that we need? Let me emphasise, responsibility for that rests with the government. But people did not believe that we were actually naming those concerns clearly enough.
And you want to believe that you can be the new government.
Yes.
So you said you're going to release a policy in 5 days' time. You're on television now. There's 250,000 people watching now. What is Sinn Féin's stance on immigration?
Our stance is that firstly, we live in a global village. People are coming in, going, it's a fact of life. It's not back like back in the good old days. People travel now for work, for study. People also flee conflict because of poverty and war.
Are you opposed to the open borders?
Well, we don't have a policy of open borders. What we want is a system that's humane, that's efficient, that's fair, and that works.
Clarity.
A rules-based.
Clarity is exactly what you're asked this weekend, what you've come out and said, that we need to be clear. This is what our voters are concerned about.
Yeah.
We need clarity.
But I'm giving you clarity.
That wasn't clear.
No, an effective system manages, on the one hand, migration, people who are coming here to work. Lots of them work in our health services. They work in all different parts of our economy. So that system of work permits has to operate. And then the asylum system for people seeking international protection has to operate efficiently. The rules need to be clear. They need to be applied. The accommodation.
So what would you do?
Well, here's one thing that should have been done, Tommy, and the government were told 5 years ago in a report by Catherine Day that reception centres had to be built. You see, we shouldn't be in a position where local hotels or anything else are being used for this accommodation. Or in the case of my own constituency, an old office block. That's not appropriate for the people who are living there.
So if we have...
They were told 5 years ago that publicly funded reception centres had to be built. They didn't do it. And because of that lack of plan, that lack of clarity coming from them, you find yourself in an emergency situation and the system becoming overwhelmed.
But what's the issue with, because of course, and you're right, 2019 Susan Day did recommend this, but when it comes to the border, and what's happening now is that we've got, Gardaí at the border and the police at the border watching people come from the north to the south, and this was highlighted an awful lot recently. Of course, you advocate a soft border, you don't want a border between the north.
I don't want a border at all.
Yeah, but it is now being watched essentially for people coming from the UK into the Republic of Ireland. And there's a worry there about racial profiling.
So, Maureen, first of all, we have a common travel area. So cooperation between police across the island is just a fact of life. When we had the Tories in government, they are now gone. We have a new administration in London. The Tories were saying to us they didn't want to have any conversation with Dublin as regards safe return of asylum seekers. That's now changed. I met with Keir Starmer last week in Belfast. I raised this issue with him. He recognises, as we do, that you have to have a system that's humane, that's human rights compliant, that's fair, that's efficient, and that means that you need a bilateral arrangement again between Dublin and London, and that sorts that.
How are you feeling at the minute? We know that your party has said they want you to be back at your authentic self.
Yeah.
We know that you went through a fairly serious operation just a few months ago. Sinn Féin need you to be at 100% going into what could be an October election. Are you going to be able to stop the momentum? Because unfortunately, the momentum is going in the wrong direction at the minute. How are you going to turn it around?
That's the nature of political life and political activism. What goes up.
We're seeing it's worked for Sinn Féin, or it's worked for Fine Gael. And new leaders come in there, they've had a massive bounce. Fianna Fáil the same. I mean, Sinn Féin were well above those two parties not that long ago.
I'm not sure that anyone has had a massive bounce. What has happened to us is that we were going very, very strongly and we stalled. So we need to fix that. That's fixed by being out, being active, doing what I've said and what the review reflected, listening to people, talking to people, reflecting what their lives are like on the ground, and doing that in a way that is firm and in a way that is consistent. And then we'll prepare for the general election. Here's the important thing from my point of view is that when people go to vote in that general election, that there is a clear choice, either to return Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil again, or a choice for a new government led by Sinn Féin. So the work we have to do now is to set out in all of the key areas, housing, I heard you talk about the healthcare system earlier on, childcare, all of these core areas, and immigration. We start that ball rolling next week, is to give clarity in terms of what it is that we bring to the table, what we would do differently and what we would do better.
Of course, there's so many things. We're going to be talking to you again between now and October, obviously, about the healthcare system, about immigration, about housing, of course. Congratulations with Tori Towie last week on getting that poor one home from Dubai. And just finally, how did you feel when people said you weren't being your authentic self? It's very Instagram. Were you like...
Well, look, you see in this job, you have to be prepared to take criticism when it's offered to you, and what do they say, constructive criticism and feedback. And I've never been touchy or overly sensitive about that. I want to do this job really, really well. I want to deliver for people, and I believe we can make this place so much better, and that we have to provide that choice when it comes to the general election. So when it comes to people making an assessment of my performance, it's probably like yourselves on television. You get all sorts of feedback. But you're always going to do better, right? You're always going to stretch yourself and go that extra mile.
That's what I'm going to get off Mary Lou. Do better. You're right.
I look forward to hearing how this policy document goes in 5 days' time. Mary Lou McDonald from Sinn Féin, leader of Sinn Féin, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Welcome back to Ireland AM, where we are in the kitchen.
Yes, we sure are. Their favourite time of my morning. Good morning to you, Edward Hayden. Great to have you with us.
Good morning to you both. How are we?
Very good, thank you very much. Excited. What are we having?
Well, we're going to have pasta. So I've got a big pot of boiling water here, and I'm just going to plunge in some of the fresh pasta. Now, I'm using the fresh tagliatelle this morning, so that'll just take a couple of minutes to regenerate. I'm just going to pop that on top. Or you could decide maybe to use the dried pasta of your choice. So I said to you on the recipe, you could use penne, spaghetti, tagliatelle, whatever. So whatever type you're using, you're just going to cook it according to the packet instructions. I'm just going to replenish that really, really quickly. Now, meanwhile then, I'm going to make kind of the sauce. Now, as always, there's a wealth of opportunities and a wealth of choice around it. But I've just got some chicken here. Now, I've just started, in the magic world of television, I've just started sealing off the chicken during the ad break. You can just see that there, that it's just starting to seal off. Okay. And as always, I've given you my tip that you just put on the salt and pepper when it, you just put on the salt and pepper when the chicken has been sealed off.
Because seasoning the table there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see, because if you hold it over the steam, you see, it wrecks the bottom of the grinder.
Now, he'd be very good in an Edward exam.
Exactly. Oh, I know my stuff now. Although I don't always agree, though, because he always says you don't season, say, the steak.
Tommy being a contrarian, Tommy being a contrarian and not agreeing with people who are more expert than him.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm after meeting more people since I was here last Thursday who said, didn't Tommy do a very good job on the Swiss roll?
Hey,
so the nation is well impressed with your Swiss roll.
It was very good.
Or the representatives that I met from it.
Good to hear.
Now, there's our chicken. I've seasoned it up then with a bit of salt and pepper. But again, as I said, the salt in particular on meat can just extract out the moisture until it has been sealed off. So it is popular to do it. I've got some chorizo there. Again, you can dice it, you can slice it. I've just left it in nice little chunks there because I think it gives a nice bit of flavour. I'm going to get it in there, and you can see very shortly after it's gone in there, you can just see that sense of spice coming out of it, that lateral, the cayenne, the kind of the paprika, all coming out of that as well. Now, I'm using chicken there today with the chorizo. Think of using smoked bacon lardons. Think of using some pancetta in there as well, if you'd so desire. So any of those things could be good and all as well in there.
Lovely.
Okay. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some vegetables. So I've just got a little bit of garlic there. So I'm going to put in a bit of diced garlic. I've got some mixed peppers. So I've got red, green and yellow. I've got a little bit of onion. You could use some courgette. You could use some mushrooms. Some carrots would be lovely in there. Again, if you want to think about things like your mange tout, your sugar snap peas, your baby corn, all of that sort of thing is lovely as well. And then I'm going to start building the sauce in the pan here. So what I've got in terms of that is I've got some cherry tomatoes. So I'm going to put those in whole, okay? And the cherry tomatoes...
There, Edward, you might need to take the lid off.
Which are we going? Yeah, we'll turn it off, actually. I'm good there, yeah. We can turn that off.
And tell me this, you wouldn't take the chicken and chorizo out once it's cooked and then cook the veg?
Now, you could if you wanted, but what I've done is I haven't, if you might call, fully cooked it. So my chicken is still not fully cooked.
Okay.
So I'm continuing to cook it, and then I'm going to make the sauce. And for all the world, Tommy, I'm going to allow this to poach out in the sauce, okay?
Are you?
So I'm going to poach it in the sauce so that we'll get a really nice sense of the flavour of the sauce in the chicken. The veg will be done with it. I suppose we've started the chicken so as to kind of accelerate its cooking and then move on from there. Now, another little bit of salt and pepper going in there as well. So bearing in mind, as I always say, you're seasoning incrementally. So season the chicken, season the veg in there as well. Okay. Now, if you wanted and if you had some left over after the weekend, I'm not sure if there is ever any left over on a Monday night, you could throw a drop of wine in there as well, OK? Drop of wine would be lovely in there. But in the absence of the wine on the Monday morning, there's no wine in Hayden's left.
It's the last thing I need at the minute.
I'm sure it is, yeah. There it was. Perhaps it's serendipitous that I didn't bring it. In there we've got our tinned tomatoes. And I've said to you in the recipe about cream, you've got the option of adding in a little bit of cream. Okay. So I just have a little bit. Again, you might have a little bit of that left over after the weekend. Again, people will often wonder about my putting it in at this stage, but I just think it's more advantageous to put it in now because, and I have to say this slowly so that I'll get it right, you will get the creamy taste as opposed to the taste of cream, OK? So it won't sit very heavily on your tummy. You know the way sometimes cream can sit very heavily. So if you put it in there, people are often concerned that it's going to split or that it's going to curdle. But I'm happy that it won't, OK, once you kind of put it in at the start
and then the sauce
allow it
just
to
heavy.
kind of flavour. The lovely tomato goes into it, the flavour of the chicken and the chorizo has time to infuse into it.
I'm
so it
still
works
stuck
really
on
nicely.
the creamy taste instead of the taste
as
of cream.
opposed to cream, yes.
Creamy taste as opposed to the taste
so it
of
gives
cream,
you the
so it
kind of
won't be-
the effect of that creaminess, but you won't kind of have, you know the way sometimes when you get like a chowder or a soup, all you can taste is the cream.
Yes.
So put it in more prematurely.
Okay.
Now you can see I've cooked that down for a few minutes and the resultant mixture is here and it's looking absolutely lovely. Look at that lovely almost terracotta colour. I'm going to take some of my blanched tagliatelle or pasta of choice and put that in. Now, the two options that you have, you can either you can put the pasta onto the plate and put the sauce on top of it, or what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to move that for a second. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to mix the two of them together, so you get a full-on effect of everything in there together, which I've just got.
As well would be nice.
Again, that will work really nicely. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to serve up. So again, I'm just going to serve a little bit. And regardless of all the mixing together, you'll find that you find the pasta first of all, and then you go looking for the chicken and all the bits. Now, I've got that there. What I've got is I've got a little bit of grated Parmesan, which I'm just going to put on the top. And because maybe there might have been some jubilations over the weekend, there might be a need for a double dose of starch.
Garlic bread.
And to that end, I have made a little bit of garlic bread as well. So if nothing will save you, Edward will save you. So there you have it. There's a lovely nice chicken and chorizo pasta supper, a little bit of basil, a little bit of grated Parmesan cheese and a bit of garlic. But that is something that people should, and I'm sure will make this coming week.
Edward, that is just...
Isn't it fab?
So good.
Yeah,
Imagine you said with the lardons, it would be amazing.
Imagine yourself now on the couch.
Happiness in a bowl, that is. Delicious.
You're very welcome.
Edward Hayden, as always.
And the recipe, of course, is online. You can find it there. Now, after the break, we're catching up with Derek. He is in the Phoenix Park in Dublin. See you in a minute.
Now, Derek has been in Phoenix Park all morning to help highlight a new campaign.
Derek, what's going on?
Yes, good morning, team. Well, the sun is shining on us down here in Park on Fionnish. We're live here from the Phoenix Park in Dublin this morning. Park Ranger Terry Moore is with us. Terry, you're the man who calls all the shots in here, right?
Yeah, you could say that, yeah. Sometimes all the hard decisions normally are made up to by the superintendent.
Anyway, good to have you here this morning. Terry, there's a brand new campaign up and running. Tell us about it.
Protect Our Park, Protect Our Deer, the new campaign. We've reignited the previous campaign, just asking people to steer clear of the deer, keep 50 metres back and don't feed them.
And don't feed them. Now, it is a massive issue at the moment. I mean, people coming in here to park, and it is a beautiful resource that we have here in the country, one of the most visited attractions, I suppose. But, I mean, people are still feeding the deer.
Yeah, constant. It's like a conveyor belt. One group comes in and then there's constantly throughout the day, they just keep coming trying to feed the deer. Most people are aware. Yeah, we just want to put it out there that, you know, everybody knows don't feed the deer when you come into the park, so people can give other people advice. Listen, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't feed the deer.
Terry, what do the deer normally eat?
Grass, mainly grass. You don't need anything much outside of grass, but they'll eat chestnuts when they're in season. They'll eat acorns, you'll see them underneath the oak trees when the acorns fall on the ground. But 90% of the diet is made up of grass.
Yeah, so that's their normal diet. When people come into the park and they're getting up close and personal with the deer, what are they feeding them?
Oh, all sorts. You're talking bread, you know, chocolates, crisps, bananas, you know, all sorts, and you name it. Yeah, stuff that you probably wouldn't give your child, you know, it'd be too sweet.
So now you're noticing that, I suppose, the deer are now begging for food.
Yeah, see, the deer have great sense of smell. So yeah, if people walk in, even if, you know, might have food in their backpack, the deer can pick it up fairly quick. So they'll go looking for the food itself, and it causes all sorts of health and safety risks. You know, we'd be afraid someone might get injured because if someone has young children, in, you know, beside the deer, they're trying to feed them or they can smell the food, the deer will come looking for the food, and they're a big animal and they're unpredictable.
And Terry, I suppose people sometimes forget that the deer are wild animals.
Exactly, yeah. It's a wild deer herd. You know, they've been here for over 360 years. You know, they're wild animals. Just leave them be. You know, we can all enjoy them if we just keep a safe distance. You know, you can. We've all got cameras. You can put them on a zoom lens, and there's no need to get as close as people do. Yeah, just don't feed them.
All right, we'll come back to you in a few moments' time. Cormail Mahagot, Terry. Jane Fall is with us. Jane, all the way from Castlebar, County Mayo. You're doing your PhD in this at the moment. Tell us what you're studying.
Yeah, so I'm looking at animal behaviour and how human interactions with animals change their natural behaviours.
Okay, so you've spent a lot of time here in the park. What have you found from your studies?
So we found a lot of distinct differences between the deer that are regularly getting fed and the deer that won't normally approach humans. So particularly we found that there's a big difference in their antlers. So the males that are regularly fed food from humans, so that can be anything from, as Terry was saying, carrots, crisps, McDonald's, anything, they have much smaller and weaker antlers. So that has an effect in their life later on when they're looking for a mate. They're not able to win fights as easily because they've got the smaller, weaker antlers. So you're essentially affecting their ability to find a mate later on. And then also there's issues with their digestive system. So internally the shape of their stomachs is changing, and that's going to affect their ability to take nutrients from their food. So regardless of what they're eating, you could affect their ability to actually take the goodness out of it.
So Jane, in effect, the health of the herd is actually in decline.
Yes. So if we continue this trend and if we continue feeding them foods that are totally unsuitable for them, their health will decline over time. So that's something that we really want to avoid because they're a fantastic amenity to have and they're in good condition now, and we'd love to keep them in this good condition.
Now, you've also done other studies. What have you found?
So we found distinct behavioural differences as well. So as Terry was saying, some individuals are starting to actually go up to people and beg for food, and that's very unusual in a species like this. They are a prey species, they're deer, they're used to having predators and trying to keep an eye out for people coming up towards them. It would be quite a big stressor for them. So we've noticed that they seem more stressed when people are coming towards them, and that's something that isn't necessarily obvious when you're looking at them. But if you know what behaviours to look out for, they're like herding very close together, they're showing kind of that they're getting aggressive towards each other, and they're just looking very bothered when people are coming up to them. And it's something that's just totally avoidable. So we would love to just reduce that stress on them.
Okay, so the message really is to stay back and don't feed them.
Yeah, exactly. Stay back, keep a respectful distance, and don't feed them anything.
All right. Jane, lots of other things happening, Terry, here in the park. What's going on at the moment?
Yeah, this weekend we have the Irish 10 mile race that's on Sunday, and also the restoration of the magazine fort is taking place at the moment.
Yeah, which is great. It's looking fantastic.
Yeah,
that'll be up and running in the next year or so.
Another year or so, yeah. And then also we have the new bus 99 route has come into the park, so same as the ice cream. So you pick it up near Parkgate Street and bring you straight up to the visitor centre.
And that's free?
No, it's not free.
Oh, it's not free?
No, there's not much for free in this world, Derek. You should know that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Say hello to your lady wife. Who is she?
Yeah, Denise. Yeah, good morning.
Hello, Denise. Yeah. And Jane, your mum and dad, all the way in Castlebar.
Angela, hello.
Good morning to you both. PhoenixPark.ie is where you'll find out more online. But for now, remember, don't feed the deer. Back to studio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Don't feed the deer.
There you have it.
Feed Tommy, don't feed the deer. That's what we're doing.
I'll eat it all the time. Who's giving the deer McDonald's? Like, come on.
Coming up after 9, we're going to speak, to YouTube star Max Fosh about his internet stardom and loopholes.
And fresh from success at the Dance World Cup, we're going to meet the dance troupe who medalled at this year's competition.
Talk to you shortly.
Good morning.
Welcome
You're
back.
very welcome back. We've discussed an awful lot this morning of what's been going on over the weekend. We're just talking to the Sinn Féin leader, Mary Lou McDonald, and interested in some of the texts coming in because obviously she was speaking about the weekend and how there's a new change of focus, I think, with Sinn Féin, that they've had to go back and look at what they've got wrong over the last while, and about connecting with the voters was one of the main things that she mentioned. Thomas has sent in a message. Sinn Féin let the people down by not coming out against the government in the last referendum. She did talk about that and how that they maybe got it wrong in going along with the government and the Yes Yes campaign. And by not taking a strong stance on refugee and asylum seekers coming into Ireland, they need to fix these issues. I mean, I'm not too sure because we tried to ask her what is their stance on that. They are releasing a policy, I think, a booklet in 5 days' time, so we weren't able to exactly get what this new stance is, but whether they're going to come out against it, I can't.
Well, again, she did point to the fact that an awful lot of people from other countries keep our health system afloat. Of
course.
That there is also international obligations when it comes to asylum seekers. Again, Mary Lou needs to build confidence in me and many others who feel let down by her. I'm willing to try again if she steps up and makes me believe in her
there you
again.
Have it. In what could be a busy time for political parties, we're still not too sure whether the election is going to go on. We kind of have a feeling it will be October, November time, but who knows? We're also talking about weddings and modes of transport to wedding. This is after a couple in Cork decided to get the train to their wedding down in Cove, treated all the guests, 100 of them, to just sit on the train.
That's lovely. I know someone who's had to spend thousands on a car. Like, I didn't realise how expensive... Like, weddings are expensive. They just put an extra zero on everything.
Well, for everything in a wedding. Like, it's
unbelievable.
Insane.
So, well done.
We have one
Great
from Zoe
idea.
as well. She got a cream 1962 Bentley S2 limousine, worth every penny. There you have it. I think we've got some other alternative wedding cars. Let's have a look at a pink tractor. Would you go to your wedding? Because you must be looking at this sort of thing now, Warren, as well.
But sure, what?
For, engaged, planning a big wedding.
Absolutely.
Nice
Do you know what I'll be doing? I'll be perambulating.
What's that
I'll
mean?
walk.
Oh, you'll walk.
I'll walk. We'll just walk.
Oh, it's about the environment.
No, it's not. It's just I'm not spending
Saving a few quid.
I'm not spending $5,000 on a car. I
Sounds about
can't get
right.
over how expensive it is. But fair play to everyone who has gorgeous things. Now, after the break, we'll be meeting YouTube star Max Fosh.
Yes, he's going to join us after the break.
Welcome back. Now, our next guest is a YouTube superstar, like such a superstar, whose videos have been viewed over 1 billion times online. He is king of the comic content creators.
Yes, and his name, of course, is Max Fosh. But before we chat to Max, good morning to you. Here's a flavour of some of the stunts he likes to pull.
My name is Max Fosh, and there is something I need to tell you. It's something.
Can you give us something a little sillier?
I mean, it's quite an important announcement. I kind of want to play this seriously. if I'm
Sure.
honest.
Yeah, here. Maybe just give it a go.
Hello, my name is Max Fosh and there's something I need to tell you.
This is me with 4 SAS soldiers. I was hoping that you guys would do most of the heavy lifting. And I'd sneakily brought them to be on my team at my friend's paintball party.
3, 2, 1, game over now! Oh, ow. Do your duty, boys.
I'm here at the US Security Expo, where the greatest minds in the US come together to stop bad guys getting into places. I'm here with a plaque that says Nick Everything International Baddie. I've broken in here today, and I don't have a cameraman with me today, so my cameraman for this particular shot is a security guard.
Max Fosh, good morning. It's great to have you with us.
Morning, guys. It's good to see that that's my legacy at the moment.
There could be worse things, trust me. Tell me, listen, your videos have just gone. It's mega, the platform of YouTube and the level of detail and the ideas that you put into your videos. How long have you been doing this? When did you realise that actual YouTube and creating content could be a career for you?
Well, I mean, it's not something that kind of just like one day I woke up and realized. I've been kind of making videos and content for probably since about 2014, so for 10 years now. And it started with just kind of interviewing students on a night out in the university city that I was at in Newcastle. And then it just slowly snowballed from there. And only since probably about 2019 is when I kind of realized, hold on, there's something here.
And when that sort of happened, because were you kind of considering going down the traditional media route, you know, working with the BBC and all that kind of stuff, and you're like, these people are all chumps?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get a job at the BBC and they didn't give me one. So I decided to take matters into my own hand. I parked my car outside the BBC with my CV that I printed on my roof of the car. And that actually got, oh, there it is, just on cue. Yeah, I printed my CV on the roof of my car and it got me noticed. It didn't get me a job. Although 3 years later, as a result, I think of like the YouTube videos, I did have my one show on Radio 1 on Christmas Day. So it did come all around, like it ended up nicely.
Full circle. Isn't that great for you? But like you did like make headlines all over the world. Like some of your pranks and stunts, whatever else, like have been reported on this, like, you know, news channels. I'm thinking the Welcome to Luton one. Explain what was the thinking behind this one.
Yeah, well, I just thought it would be quite funny if on the approach to Gatwick Airport, I rented one of the fields just before the landing and wrote in massive letters in tarpaulin, "Welcome to Luton," so that people would very, very, just for half a second, think that they might have landed at the wrong airport. And yeah, that went absolutely bananas. Kind of like all the press picked it up. It did super well on YouTube. And I think the reason is just because it is just so silly and lighthearted and it's not really punching down on anyone, but it's just something that everyone could enjoy and be like, oh, that's a bit of fun.
Because what you don't see in that clip, that not everybody who was on the flight enjoyed it. They were pretty annoyed.
Yeah, I spoke to the woman behind me because we'd put it down on the grass. We didn't know what it looked like. So I took a flight from London Heathrow to London Gatwick via Amsterdam. That was interesting. And as we approached and saw Welcome to Luton, I said to the woman behind me, oh, have you seen that? It says Welcome to Luton. And she turned to me, oh, someone's played a silly trick. Who would do that? And I just had to go, yeah, who would do that? That sounds awful.
And there's nothing that I remember watching Taskmaster and Tim Vine trying to go outside an airport and put a sign up, and the guards came along fairly lively, but you legitimately rented it. There's nothing they can do.
No, there's nothing they could do. I don't think the family who lived about a mile away from the airport, they were like, sure, go ahead. I never got anyone from the airport coming to knock on my door and say, hey, can you take that down?
I was watching also the SAS, you kind of had the special forces going to do the paintballing with you as well. It was a bit of a mismatch, that one. But like, talk to us, like what sort of level, because I watch YouTube with my kids sometimes and I kind of think like, you know, these things just happen. I mean, it's you wonder how they watch it, but the engagement is incredible. And for you, like with over 1 billion views, like what sort of level of effort and planning goes into each video?
I mean, it is a lot, and oftentimes we're kind of like beholden to like whether the production works. Like we had an idea where I realized that there was a loophole that meant that I could enter into Mr. Universe bodybuilding competition without actually doing any training, and so that we just spent months and months trying to work out a way I could do that, and we eventually found a way. And so that was beholden to like whether that was going to be possible or not. And so often videos take a long time to come to fruition, and so we've got lots on the back burner at the moment, just trying to make sure to just see whether they're going to work. For example, if anyone who's watching Ireland AM has a cruise ship, I've been trying to water ski behind the back of one for about 3 years.
Okay, I don't think the insurance is going to be great for that one, Max.
I know. The insurance broker is going to be tough on that one.
Are you any good at water skiing?
I can do it. Behind a cruise ship, I'm not so sure, but it is possible.
It is possible. This is the sort of thing you'd be like, is that possible? He'd want to do something like this. This is a big production. You know, an awful lot of thought goes into all of these things. And there is someone, you know, your equivalent in the US is Mr. Beast. He's globally known all over the place. And he has said, someday I might run for the president of the United States. The fellow would probably win, to be honest. You did run for London mayor.
I did, yeah. I came 19th out of 20 in the 2020 London mayor. My main manifesto point was don't vote for me. So surprisingly, I got any votes at all. But yeah, I did it because I thought it would be an interesting experience, but also because I wanted to encourage young people to vote as well, which I hope was successful. But yeah, it was just like amazing. That was an opportunity.
I believe you just wanted to beat Lawrence Fox, who of course is that very outspoken media personality. Did you?
Yes.
Was he 20th?
Darling, Lawrence and I were two posh boys with no experience in politics. Well, I thought, hey, let's go head to head, old Lozza. And I tell you what, he did not like me by the end of that.
He did not like you at all. I remember some comments of his when you were doing that. It was a bit of fun. I have to say, I enjoyed the nature of it. Just a bit of fun. Come here. You are also in the work because you've done the Fringe. You've done Edinburgh Fringe. You're doing your stand-up. You're doing all that kind of stuff, and you're learning your craft. So you have got a new stage show that's going to be coming to Ireland. Tell us about it.
I do. It's called Loophole. It's a stage show, comedy show, storytelling show about all of the loopholes that I have found whilst making videos on the internet. I'm coming to Dublin and Belfast on 27th and 28th. 26th and 27th of September. Don't come on 28th, I won't be there. And part of the show, there is a loophole that I have found that I don't think anybody else realises exists.
In Ireland now, or just in general?
Just in general. I am kind of revealing a loophole that I don't think anyone has spotted. Which
can we benefit from this loophole?
If you come to the show, you absolutely can, Tom. Absolutely, you can.
I wonder what this could
change your life.
Well, he spent years working this. He's trying to get water ski behind a bloody ferry.
No,
for
I
goodness
know.
sake.
I'm just like, what could the loophole be?
Tell us, with YouTube, because you put so much effort into these videos, and they're quite long form, a lot of them. But like, we're seeing the rise in, obviously TikTok is huge, but even in YouTube Shorts. Do you think the industry is changing in a way?
They absolutely are changing, but I don't think a lot of people say, "Oh, is it the end of like linear TV or other forms of media?" And I don't think so at all, because all the social media, or all media, serves people in different capacities. So Shorts is very quick, short form, as it says, but it's meant to be digested very quickly. No one's then going to not watch, let's say, a crime drama on the telly. So I think that the way that we consume media is changing. But what I love about YouTube is just the ability. The barrier to entry is so low. Like previously, I had to get kind of permission from somebody, a producer or a commissioner, to allow me to make things. Whereas now, if you've got an idea and you can do it on a budget, then anybody can do it. And then it's up to the audience as to whether they like it and engage with it. And if they do, it's just going to fly.
And is it because I can't imagine looking at that counter, because is it you get upset if you don't get 1 million views on something? You must be refreshing all the time.
We're the same.
It is so bad for you. I kind of feel like, the rats in the experiment when they press the button for food and they're constantly just pressing. It is, it's probably the least healthy part of the job, is being access to the data. Yeah.
Isn't it mad though, like when you start off and you just think of 100 views, 1,000, and all of a sudden you're doing it head in, we don't get 1 million. Listen, Max, you are going to be in Belfast and Dublin, as you just mentioned, on the 26th and 27th of September, all part of your Loophole tour. I'm looking forward to seeing what this loophole is. And of course, you can find you online, Max Fosh. Pleasure to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks,
Good
Max.
to chat to him.
Cheers.
There you go. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to be diving into some of the best new young adult novels.
And we'll be joined by an inspiring group of dancers from Dublin's
novels.
Summerhill.
You're back here after this break.
Okay. Welcome back. It's time now to dive into this summer's top young adult book.
Yes, from romance to sci-fi, we're covering all bases this morning, and guiding us through them all is CEO of Children's Books Ireland, Elena Ryan. Good morning to you, Elena.
Good morning.
Great to have you with us. You've got a great selection here, so let's get straight into it. Heartstopper, a book we know we've seen for years, but it's now Oscailga.
Yes, and so there are 5 volumes of Heartstopper available in English, and finally we have a translation, Oscailga, and this is a huge deal. We don't have a whole heap of graphic novels in Leabhar Gaeilge, and we don't have a whole heap of queer representation either. So it's really exciting to see this. I won't go into the story of Nick and Charlie. I think probably everyone has seen the Netflix series, but this is a big moment for families who speak Irish at home. And it's really worth a read, even if you're not that confident in your language. The stories tell so much of the picture in this, so it's a really accessible
we can
read.
see it, just sorry, the pictures on the inside.
We're going to go to a new book now. This is from March 2024, Echo Star by Melinda Salisbury. Tell me about this.
Yes, so this is published by Barrington Stoke, and they're a dyslexia-friendly publisher. So inside this one, you'll see the pages are kind of an off-white. The font is designed specially for folks who have dyslexia, so it's kind of rounded, really easy to read. And you'll notice the book is quite skinny. it's a shorter book, but it's also by a writer who's really well known, because Barrington Stokes' model is to get writers who are well established, so there's no stigma around the look of the book, the feel of the book. And this story is brilliant, such a page turner.
What's it about?
It's about two girls, Ruby and Deva, who are mad into acting. They don't want to be in school at all, but they've got to get through their final term so that they can go to this incredible performing arts summer camp. But they need a little bit of help. And one of them all of a sudden is performing better than the other. So it comes out that there's a little help with something they think is AI and actually turns out to be quite dark. So this is a bit of a fable about how much information you might give away when you're on the internet.
Echo Star is always watching.
It's
and
quite
listening.
creepy.
Dun, dun,
And I listened to the
dun.
audiobook. It's available on audiobook, included in Spotify Premium. So really accessible, but such a page turner.
Sorry for my ignorance. Why the yellow when it comes to dyslexia?
Easier on the eye. The
Wow,
contrast
okay.
of black on white can be hard if you struggle with reading things on a
Amazing.
page.
Wow, that's fantastic.
That's why sometimes they have yellow pages. Okay, yes. Let's move on to 4 Eids and a funeral.
Yes, this is a great title, and 2 really heavy hitters of young adult fiction. So Adiba Jaigirdar is Irish-Bangladeshi. She's won lots of our KPMG Children's Books Ireland Awards, and Farida BK Yamide is the author of Ace of Spades.
So 2 authors.
Yeah, I'm mad to know how they did it. Oftentimes when we interview writers about how they do dual perspective narratives, it's that one of them has written one character.
Yeah.
So in this, you're hearing from Tiwa and Saeed. They're formerly childhood best friends. When we meet them at the start of the book, they're enemies. And of course, at the end of the book, maybe they become a little bit more. So they're brought together by the funeral of a librarian in their town who was a big influence and a mentor to both of them. They're left with joint custody of her cat in her will. And on the day of her funeral, there's been a fire at the Islamic Centre, and they have to unite over a summer to basically save the Islamic Centre from destruction. So it's a kind of a battle against the town who want to destroy it that brings them together.
Feel
Really
good,
well written.
hilarious, and gorgeous, well written as well, I gather, too.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, we're going to move on to Little Bang.
Yes.
This is this is about a 15-year-old good girl.
Yes, who, of course, on her first date on New Year's Eve with bad boy Sid, falls pregnant. This is by Kelly McCaughrean, who is an extraordinary Belfast writer. And she has set this in the North at the time when the South is campaigning for repeal. So you have that political backdrop of, what if I don't want to keep this baby? I was destined for Oxford or Cambridge. I have my ambitions, and what am I going to do? So actually hearing it from the girl's perspective is really interesting because her family are really quite religious, quite devout, extremely judgmental of the situation she finds herself in. And she, of course, is having a full-on crisis. It is brilliantly written. It actually is very funny, despite the serious subject matter. Like,
Does it
The title is very funny.
The title
Fair
tells
play.
you a lot
Very good.
about
Does it leave you on a bit of a wanting more? Potentially a sequel?
Not with this one, but with the next one that I'm going to talk to you about. We might talk to Cynthia Murphy. So Signed, Sealed, Dead.
Okay,
This is cliffhangers on every chapter. So this is a real, you can tell by the cover, crime fiction. It's kind of psychological horror, a little bit of gore. English girl Paige moves to small town America where her dad is from. And as they move into the house, a bunch of teenagers come up and say, you know your house is haunted, right?
Right.
There were girls who went missing and were killed in the 90s. And it was a series of murders, 5 girls killed, 1 escaped. And that took place. One of the girls lived in your house. Paige starts receiving letters in her little American mailbox every day. Hello, Paige. Have you found what's in the walls yet? So things unfold. You have a whole cast of characters from the homecoming king to the mayor. It feels very American. She, of course, is a fish out of water, freshly arrived from the UK.
But she's got the outside perspective, the sort
And
of
she's a
European
true
view
crime
in
nut.
on it.
Yeah, so she's like, what is happening? I'm spooked, but also I really want to find out what all this is about. So this is a huge page turner, but left on a massive cliffhanger. There has to be a sequel to this.
And in relation to all of this, because I suppose that's one thing that I always love, like my point horrors, the thrillers when I was quite a young person.
This author read point horror, and you can feel that influence in her writing.
That sort of creepy sort of stuff that kind of...
Very much so.
Because I know some parents might feel, oh God, is my little one a bit too young for it?
What age are you thinking? Yeah.
Like, this is young adult. We say 15 plus because just in terms of physical violence, there's a bit of gore at the end of it. There's a lot of language right through it the parents mightn't like. If parents have questions, read the book. Read it first. You know, what harm? The worst that can happen is that you actually enjoy crime fiction. But we would say 15 plus for this. I mean, what they're seeing on the news, to be honest, is pretty grim as it is, so you can't shield them from everything. And exploring something like that in a book is very safe.
So 15 to what? What is kind of the parameters for young adults?
Oh, it's very much debated, but 15
Okay. Oh,
plus.
really?
I know.
Okay,
young
right.
adults
So-
actually has a huge number of adult readers.
I took a day off to finish the Twilight series off work.
Did you?
I swear to God, it came out. I went
Never
down
take a day
and
off
I took
work.
a day off
Where
work.
you are not the only
I was
one,
so into
genuinely.
it.
But yeah, upper end, I guess, is kind of 19, I suppose. But you will get loads of teenagers who are reading YA hand in hand with adult
Well, they're just
fiction,
good. They're just good.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly, we have got Wild East. This is by Ashley Hickson Lovins.
Yes,
What's this
and
about?
this is a verse novel. So young lad Ronnie moves from Hackney in East London to Norwich, which is quite a culture shock for him. But Ronnie has witnessed the death of a friend of his in a case of mistaken identity, and his mum decides they just have to get out of where they live in London, go for something a little bit different. But of course, new boy at school, not a heap of confidence, dealing with this huge trauma in his life, and he finds solace in a writing residency. So someone comes into his school every Friday to do a bit of writing with them, and then he's offered a place on a residential course, and it's life-changing for him.
If Muireann holds that up
Yeah,
and shows
see,
the way
it's-
it's written, so you said verse novel.
That's right.
So what do you mean? Why is it written like that?
So it's written in poetry, not always rhyming poetry. We talked about Serena Malloy for younger children when I was last on. So verse novels are becoming more and more of a thing. They were huge in the States, but now coming to the UK and Ireland. So actually, it's very little text on the page. It's really accessible. Like the words pack a punch. If you've ever heard someone doing spoken word, it's very like that. It's not necessarily rhyming, but there's a cadence and
Is
a
it an
rhythm to
easy
the words.
read, though?
It is quite an easy read. And again, like the subject matter is sometimes quite heavy in this. You've got a boy trying to make new friends, trying to settle, figure out who he is, where he fits in this new school. He's one of the very few black students in the school and stands out
It is
enormously
interesting
for
with
that.
this, when it comes to prose novels, you kind of sometimes have to start reading it aloud, maybe the first few pages, and then the
Yeah.
brain kind of slips into that rhythm.
Yeah, and especially if you like to listen to audiobooks. I mean, this one would be beautiful read
Unread
aloud,
one,
and it's
yeah.
kind of peppered with Ronnie's own poetry inside the book as well, the things that he's writing. So I think they have a lot of heart, these
You have
verse novels.
loads of different genres here.
Yeah,
In terms
something
of
for
young
everyone.
adult, though, is there a favourite? What always goes probably the best?
I think the crime is huge at the moment.
Crime, yeah.
There's a lot of Holly Jackson being published. You have Deirdre Sullivan, who's done a lot of this kind of psychological horror, now moving into that witchy themes with the likes of Sarah Maria Griffin, Maura Fowley Doyle, both for adults and for young adults. But we like to have a bit of a spread because it's very hard to say all teenagers like this. And that's the danger.
But it is funny, true crime and crime as well, even at that age
It's
too, is
really
massive because
big.
it's
kind
huge.
of there.
Yeah.
And also, just let people know, Libraries Ireland, if you're not too sure, they've got BorrowBox, which is their free
Amazing.
audio book. Like,
Yeah.
if you're a member of a library, you can have access to BorrowBox if your children would like to listen to something rather than read something.
And I often do that, especially in the car. But all of these, you'll find loads of reviews on our website.
Yeah.
Like Heartstopper is featured in our Pride Guide, which has lots of queer representation. But if you go to our website and you're
all
wondering
there.
where to direct a young person, it's all there. You can do it by age and theme.
Elena Ryan, CEO of Children's Books Ireland, thank you so much.
Thank you, Elena.
There we go. Now, after the break, we're heading outside. We're putting our dancing shoes on.
We sure are. You're not going to want to miss it. We've got a Dublin dance troupe coming up after the break.
Welcome back. Our next guest recently raised €40,000 to give their dance group the chance to head to Prague to compete in the Dance World Cup.
Yes, that is right. And they didn't come back empty-handed. They came third overall at the event. And here to tell us more is Alicia Arkins of the Arkins Dance Academy. Good morning, to you, Alicia. Good morning to you,
How are you? How's it
Congratulations.
going?
Show us those medals. Let's have a look.
This.
Oh, my goodness.
They're hefty.
Unbelievable. I love when people bring in medals in. I get so excited about it. Alicia, it's amazing to go over there, to raise so much money, to take the dance troupe over there, but to come back with a medal. How amazing. How proud are you?
Unbelievably proud. I just wanted it for them because when we were fundraising, I did keep saying, I know if you'll get them there, they'll make us proud. And I just knew they would make them proud. And they just proved it. Third in the world.
So let's go back a little bit about this dance school.
Yeah.
You know, your name is Arkins.
Yeah.
Arkins is over the door. So
Yeah.
how did it all start and where is it based?
In Sean McDermott Street, the parish priest gave my mum the keys when she was 14, and she started doing dance class in the local area with people from the local area. And obviously she had me when she was 16. She says that's very bold, but look at me now. She brought me in, and I was obviously a student there when I was teenager, 14, 15. I started teaching then as well, and since then have took over.
Unbelievable. And tell us a little bit more about the World Cup then that you had to go to.
So the World Cup is basically like the Olympics of dance. Like, it's the biggest dance competition in the world, the biggest stage you could possibly be on. On Friday, it was an opening ceremony. There was over 20,000 people at the opening ceremony. Wow. And that's when we kind of realised, right, this is a really, really big deal.
Like, you're competing with, obviously, dance teams.
Oh my God.
Some of that from all over the world, obviously.
All over the world, yeah.
And were you intimidated? Sorry.
No, do you know what? We kind of were by like how big the other countries were and stuff like that, but we're all there for the same thing, all share the same passion, so.
This is unbelievable. It's like watching, you know, cheer or one of those cheerleader things, like when you're on this sort of a stage and you're doing all these things together. 40 grand to get over there. How long did you have to raise that money?
And we were stuck for 4 months at 8,000, and then we went to the papers. I literally went everywhere because there was no way. We were after telling them already they were in the finals, and then I found out the price, so I couldn't know.
The way Jake just smiled there going, oh yeah, she told us we were going. So you had to find this money, people dug deep and got you over there, because it's all about the look, it's about everything. You have to have everything sorted.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Bella, tell us, how amazing was it? Like, even at the opening ceremony in front of 20,000 people, did you enjoy every minute of it?
Yeah, it was just unbelievable, like seeing everybody from different countries and even coming toward it was just like amazing.
Your family and friends must be so proud.
Yeah.
What was it like bringing home the medal?
Oh, like we actually couldn't believe it. Still to this day, we still can't believe it. Like, we came toward against so many countries.
It was unbelievable. Jake, I know, listen, you had some sad news just before with your mother, unfortunately passed away, but you must have been so proud to do her proud. I'm sure she's watching.
Yeah, I know that's what she wanted me to do, so I was like...
Did you love it? Was it?
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, you should have seen. This was like a heavy competition. So the thing we came toward is like amazing. Like.
Tell them where that was this morning when you're looking for it. Where'd your dad put it?
On my ma's. I should just...
His dad keeps taking it, putting it, and every time someone comes into his house, his dad's holding it. Look.
Look at this. Because it really is. Like, I know we talk about Ireland punching above their weight in so many things, but like, you've obviously been dancing for a very long time. How many is in the troupe?
There's 28 in the competition team, but we have a stage school of over 100 kids from the area.
And what's the dedication that involves? Because obviously there's hours and hours and hours going into this and keeping children involved, present, because there's all different age groups, right?
Yeah. Well, they come after school. We can't seem to leave the hall, and they come after school. They get changed into their dance clothes, and they stay there till 8 or 9 p.m. in the evening. And now that we have summertime, they were in from 10 in the morning, all day.
What's the interest levels? And something like this, whenever they realise that they can actually take part in a competition like that, must be amazing going forward too.
Yeah, it's amazing. And for them, I know from me doing it when I was younger, that's what they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. And to be able to give them that experience was just unbelievable.
What you did is so interesting. So your performance starts with newsreel clips about the area where you're from, about Summerhill and about Sheriff Street, and things that have been said about the area. And then it moves into Pink's What About Us. Can you tell us about doing that?
When we actually done it a couple of years ago, and when I found out we were going to do the World Cup and how big of a stage it was, I said there's nowhere better, no bigger platform to let people know, right, good people come from the inner city of Dublin, and good people come from Ireland, because all you hear is bad stuff, and especially around the area where we're from, it mostly is bad stuff happening, but they're the good of the area, and there is good people there.
Yeah, you'll have to get Sabrina Carpenter to come in, because she is. I just tell them it's just our culture. You're like, Barry's from the flats, lads.
Oh, we have two of his nieces in the...
They're in the dance school?
In the dance school, yeah.
There we go now. Have to sort Sabrina Carpenter out, lads.
Will you, next year, like it was €40,000 to go over there, do you think you'll be able to go over and defend it?
No, not financially and stressfully for me. But we have competitions here in Ireland that we're looking to get to more than we usually could, so sometimes we have to pick between some that we can go to, but now we're looking to to go to them all over here, yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic. Congratulations
Thanks so
to all of you. Well done. You're so proud.
You just look so cool as well.
Are you going to do a little
the
performance for us?
They are, yeah.
Okay, very much. I'm very excited for that, and I'm going to be in the background.
Of
now,
course
coming
he
up
is.
on tomorrow's show,
Get
we're
ready,
going to
let's go.
investigate the rise of cool cautioning. That is a holiday somewhere.
Cool-cationing. Isn't it?
Okay.
Comedian Justine Stafford joins us to chat about her latest podcast. It is so interesting. It's brilliant.
It's all going on here. And the sensational Nelly Furtado is going to join us to discuss her new career and new music.
But right now, they came third in the world at the dance competition. This is so amazing. This is Arkin's Dance Academy. Take it away.
Open drug dealing, violence and theft. For many, the city centre has become a no-go zone when the sun goes down.
I think the north side in particular, the north side of town in particular, is an absolute disgrace, I have to say. It's intimidating, it's full of dereliction, vacancy. There's a lot of antisocial activity because of that. And it's a scandal really that the capital city is in that condition. And you get the sense that people have just given up on it.
What about us? What about all the times you said you had the answer?